All right, everybody, hello and welcome to the In the Mixer podcast. Today we are previewing Newcastle Jets and we are joined by the very talented, the very passionate Rickii, who's been a Newcastle Jets supporter for how long, Rickii?
Oh, probably since day one.
Newcastle probably have one of the more interesting stories given their background within the region before the A-League actually kicked off. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your history with the club and with the team and what really made you fall in love with the Jets as your side within the A-League?
Yeah, well, I'm from Sydney. Been there my whole life. We've had a holiday house at Lake Macquarie, so I've since I was a kid been going to a lot of nights games in the NRL, and then I've always been a soccer fan. I like to call it football. Yes, I've been playing that my whole life. So as soon as the team came into the A-League, all my mates were going to Sydney. I like to be a bit different, so I went for Newcastle. Since then, I've had a few mates that are Wanderers fans, Sydney FC fans. So every game now, we travel up and we stay at the holiday house, make it a bit of a weekend. There's about 8 of us now, so yeah, it's pretty good. I just love Newcastle. Well, I love Newcastle, and they've seemed to follow suit.
No, that's perfect, man. I've only ever done one trip to Newcastle and to the Hunter Stadium, but it was cool. It's a nice area, and I think when the teams are doing well and everyone's getting behind them, whether it is the Knights in the NRL or even the basketball teams that they have sporadically, and the Jets, of course, themselves, like the town and the whole Hunter Valley region really gets behind it. So it's a great place to go. Definitely one to check out, and I think they've had a really good history throughout the league when they've been performing well. The last 12 months is no exception to that, and then, of course, looking back throughout the history, their championship in 2008 was a really good time for football in that region and in that part of the world. Do you have fond memories of that 2008 championship? Were you actually following the team that closely during that time?
Yeah, I was definitely. I went to the grand final. I remember sitting on I think it was like the eastern side, right in the sun, and yeah, that was a pretty good day. The memories are they're getting thinner now because it was a long time ago, but yeah, it was definitely one of the brighter days. But yeah.
That's all right, man. At least you've got one. I'm a City fan, so when we were hard, we never got close to winning anything. And then we've got one FFA Cup triumph that is the only thing I can really celebrate, and even then it was under dubious circumstances. So one day we'll get something, mate, but no one can take your one away from you just yet.
Exactly. Well, the VAR did last year, but
yeah, that's a whole other conversation. I do have a note down here later to go through that a little bit, and we can talk about it further. Of course, referring to the grand final last year, with Melbourne Victory 1-0 winners, albeit in controversial circumstances against the Jets, who I think played some fantastic football in the lead up to that final. I'll just go through a bit of their history now. Obviously, a foundation club within the Hyundai A-League, the one championship that we've already discussed in 2008. They are owned by the Ledman Group, which is an LED lighting company based out of China. They were purchased in 2016 under a bit of a mysterious cloud as to how Chinese ownership and foreign ownership was going to work within the A-League. Obviously, already highlighting the Bakri Group, the Indonesian consortium that owns Brisbane Roar. It has been relatively hit and miss with foreign ownership and certainly magnate ownership in the A-League. But I think the Lebanon Group have actually done a really good job in terms of sponsorship and, giving the club proper investment in terms of like training grounds, personnel, whatever else. And even though there's been one or two Chinese players kind of wedged into the squad, it hasn't been overrun with what you'd call like Asian marquee players or anything like that. What are your thoughts on the Ledman Group, and how have you experienced Newcastle differently since they took over in 2016?
Well, it's been good since they've come on board. The main thing with Newcastle, they like to have a successful team, which hasn't been for quite a while, but they like to get that community involvement, engagement, and I think since the Ledman Group brought Laurie on board, that's been one of the main things that the club's been looking at. Like I noticed through the social channels on Instagram and Facebook, they're getting involved at grassroots level. They're going to preschools, primary schools, high schools, getting involved in these sort of things, and it's only a good thing. And then that's possibly why, apart from the results last year, but that's why the crowds are getting bigger, and you're seeing the membership hopefully being at a record level this year of above 11k. So
I think at the moment they're currently sitting third in the standings behind Melbourne Victory, obviously, with about 25,000, and then Western Sydney I think already have like 8 or 9, and Newcastle really kind of just leapfrogging both Sydney and Melbourne City in those standings to be third in current membership tally, which I think is a great backing for the club, the project, and the owners themselves.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I think last year we just sat at 9,000, and coming off like a wooden spoon. That's shows a bit of loyalty and shows you how passionate our fans are. So it's good, and yeah, hopefully this year you get a few new guys on board, and yeah, as Laurie's hoping to get 11, and yeah, or even more. So hopefully we do, because the more, as you've seen in the semi-finals and towards the end of the season, the grand final, the more in the bigger the crowds, the better the atmosphere, and then the players seem to feed off that, and the games are so much better, and it's so entertaining, and it's just going to keep bringing more and more fans, and yeah, it's what we need in the A-League.
Yeah. What's the stadium called now? McDonald Jones, is that right?
Yeah. McDonald Jones Stadium, yeah.
Yeah, and being like a rugby league stadium, it's like being at that rectangular variety. When you get a full house and everyone's right on top of the pitch, it's a really unique atmosphere. Like down here in Melbourne, we had to wait years for Amy Park to actually get developed as a proper rectangular pitch within Melbourne. And the years prior to that, when we played, when Victory was playing at Olympic Park and you were behind a running track, and when games were held at Etihad Stadium, now Marvel Stadium, like you were so far back from the pitch, having a specialised venue, in particular a rectangular venue for Newcastle, I think is absolutely huge and helps them have one of the better environments once it is a full house. So that's good to see. Looking at the last 5 league positions, 13-14 finished in 7th spot, 1 place outside of the top 6 and finals football. 14-15, 10th place finish, 15-16 and 8th place finish, 10th again in 16-17. And then last year, seemingly out of nowhere, going from the wooden spoon the year before with largely the same squad, albeit with a couple of additions throughout the season and early days once Ernie Merrick stepped in, finished 2nd in the league, and I think a lot of people would agree were very unlucky to lose that grand final to Melbourne Victory last year. What was your season highlight from the 17-18 season?
Well, based on the previous season, the 3 seasons before that, last 8th and then last, as you said, I think the whole season as a whole was perfect. Not just on the field, but off the field. Laurie signed some big players like Daniel Georgeski, Dimi Petrados, Roy O'Donovan. So he showed that we can attract some players, and then, as you've seen, we played a bit better on the field and led to that position. So the results throughout the whole season, I think we lost 7 or 5 games. So we were just competitive in every game, and that's what we liked. That's what the crowd loves, just the competitive team. You don't have to win every week, but that's a bonus. But yeah, the whole season as a whole. But if I had to mark it down to one game, it was towards the end of the season. We were sitting on 2nd or 3rd up the top there, and everyone started to believe. There was a few people sitting on the fence, but there was a game versus Sydney FC at home as the RAAF round where the Jets fly over the top. I think it was like 17,000, and Roy got a red card early on, and Jimmy scored a penalty, and then Naboot scored that screamer at the end. And it was that game where everyone, I think, started to jump on and really believe that, hey, we can win this thing. Then the couple of weeks after that, we didn't go too good. Then we spanked Central Coast, and then we beat Melbourne City in the semis. Sorry about that.
So no, that's all right. I don't think we could say Newcastle Jets beat Melbourne City. I think we could say Riley McGree and his back heel wonder goal beat Melbourne City. And like, look, to be completely honest, it was a game that I think we started really well in the first 15 minutes. And then after that, it was pretty much Newcastle's to win. And if you're going to go out to a goal, you would want it to be a goal of the quality of that particular strike. And I dare say it's one that we're going to be seeing throughout highlight reels for the competition from now until the end of time. And we'll probably have to listen to Andy Speed screaming, "Oh my goodness," into the microphone, Riley McGree, over and over again, anytime we ever see our Newcastle highlights package again. So an incredibly special goal, and what was a pretty special night, I think, for Newcastle as a football club, and unfortunately weren't able to carry it on in the final. We will talk about the final a little bit further later on, but I'd also like you to pick out your greatest frustration from the 17-18 season, and what you think is, something that you would like to see improved upon this year to kind of push you to that next level, go from being 2nd in the league to being a team like everyone else is chasing for a title, or everyone expects to be in the grand final every single year.
Well, the biggest frustration I pinpointed was possibly towards the end of the season, when just on making our run into the semis, we're playing good football, and then Urawa Reds come in and put a bid in for Naboot, and he leaves. And you could see on the field we started to drop a bit. We lost a few games, and sort of that momentum towards the end of the season that you want building up coming into a final series really went away. So I can understand like the money's there. They don't want to hold players back from going into bigger and better things financially and football wise. So I can see where the club was going there. And good luck to Andrew. But I'm hoping this season, I'm hoping that towards the end of the season, if that sort of thing happens again for a Dimi Petradas, or if Roy's banging them in, or Mitch Austin's going all right, and these kind of clubs come again, hopefully we can try and say no, or hopefully we have a sort of a plan B just in case that sort of thing happens. But yeah, I don't know how you organise those sort of things better.
Yeah,
That's
I think
boys.
I think obviously Andrew Nabu had a phenomenal season last year, and was his form and sort of return to, or what would you say, him maximising the potential that he had for a long time in the league was a massive reason for Newcastle's upturn. I think what also hurt that particular transfer is that he'd just been called into his first Socceroos squad, and he wanted to make the World Cup team, and he knew that by moving to Japan he was going to get consistent football from when the A-League season usually ends around March, April, May, all the way through until the start of the World Cup period, so that he wouldn't have an off season, so to speak. He'd go straight from a domestic season in Japan right into the World Cup squad. It ended up working out really well for him personally. You can kind of understand why he made that decision, but obviously frustrating 2 or 3 weeks before the final series is about to begin, and while you're in the middle of a league championship battle yourselves, to see one of your star players head in the opposite direction. I'd hate to see it happen in my area. Thankfully, we're never that close to the league title, so it hasn't come up as yet. But yeah, no, definitely I think a fantastic shout for a big frustration in 17-18. And fingers crossed, given that they have that backing and there isn't really the need for them to bring in that resource and be cash flow positive, that we can see them hold on to some of their shining lights. So far this season, the FFA Cup lost in the round of 16, 1-0 to City. Was a relatively even game. Really could have gone either side for either side. I think both this game that City played and the previous game against Brisbane, they looked very much like pre-season friendlies. The tough part about FFA Cup is that you're catching a lot of the lower division teams that are coming to the end of their season and are at peak match fitness and know their systems and structures and the players they're playing with. Whereas A-League sides have likely just been on a training paddock for the last 8 weeks trying to get match fitness and sharpness back for those games. So did you actually catch any of that match, and what was your reaction from the Newcastle side?
Yeah, well, I watched the game before that as well. We versus Gold Coast. The one, you are right that the NPL sides and that are coming off towards the end of their season, so they're much fitter. But we just come back from a pre-season tour of Spain where we played some teams over there, so we had a bit of match fitness. So, but even then, we still had a few players out. Like you got Roy suspended. We had a few injuries. So yeah, the Gold Coast game wasn't the best, especially when you're an A-League team. But yeah, we got away with that 1-0. It was a shabby little goal as well. I think it was who scored it? Topper Stanley. But yeah, the Melbourne City game, I think I watched bits of it. But yeah, from what I've seen, yeah, you're being nice when you're saying it's even. We didn't play too good, but yeah, I think we were lucky it was only 1-0. But yeah, as I said, we had a few players out.
Yeah. What I have noticed, particularly in the last few years with the FFA Cup, is that the teams that are doing a little bit better financially, like ourselves, Melbourne Victory, Sydney FC, they're able to kind of start getting their squad together and have the bulk of their... So usually it's a squad of about 23 and a couple of scholarship players who are juniors also released in the squad to make it roughly around 25, 26. The bigger clubs, those 3 in particular, seem to always have a good 17 or 18 players announced by the time the FFA Cup draw actually takes place, because they're actually able to pay them their week's wages for that period. So for City or Melbourne Victory or Sydney FC, who have a ton of income and have really good finances, they can afford to pay those players for like an extra 4 or 5 weeks of the season. Whereas a club like Newcastle, who's probably still striving to be at profit, or a team like a Wellington or a Western Sydney that is owned by a more modest ownership group, it can be the difference between, breaking even in a season and registering a profit by signing people to 8-month and 9-month contracts rather than paying them for a full season. So I'm kind of stealing a little bit of my own knowledge from Football Manager and FIFA and whatever other games that I know there. But I think it definitely comes into play for the FA Cup with a lot of the teams in terms of the structure of how their squads are going to look. And I think that's why you can see very different lineups in the round of 32 and round of 16 of the FA Cup to what actually turns out for your side in round 1. Right, so I guess we'll go through the interesting portion now, which are the players both in and out for the club. I'll start with the players out first. First one is Petito Rodriguez, has been released and hasn't yet been picked up by a club at the time of recording. What were your reaction to Pato Rodriguez? Obviously, he had exceptional talent, but it's whether it showed through in the limited appearances that he had for the team.
Yeah, well, he scored on debut, didn't he? And it was a pretty good goal, actually. So I was excited, and all the highlights you see on YouTube, they indicated that he was a good player, but they didn't show 90 minutes each week, do those highlights. So yeah, he was good. He had his glimpses, but from what I've read on social media, I think he didn't like to train as hard as you're supposed to, as much as the coaches wanted to, and he was more of an attacking player where he didn't want to defend as much. He didn't have that defensive side to the game, and when you got a Dimi Petrata said you'd like to attack more and not have to do so much work in defence, you can't afford to have 2 or 3 of those sort of players on the field, otherwise you're going to get hit on the counter. So yeah, he did look good, but if we had to pick between him and Vargas, I'm glad Vargas stayed.
Yeah, we'll go through Rodrigo Vargas in a little bit when we talk about his contract and his marquee status. I thought Pato Rodriguez definitely had flashes of quality. You could tell he has played a bit and he does have a bit about him at times. I do think we're also guilty in the league of signing anyone that has ever played anywhere near Lionel Messi. And obviously being involved in the same Argentina junior structure, both he for yourselves and Matthias Sanchez that played at Melbourne Victory. But obviously both very talented Argentine players coming through that system at around the same time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that quality transfers. And usually there is kind of an element of, if there's a player that's bounced around and had 12 months contracts for the last few years of his career, there is probably a reason behind that. So the next one, of course, is Riley McGree on loan from Club Bruges. His loan has ended and he's now headed down my way to Melbourne City. What was your read on him once he actually came into the team about halfway through the season?
Yeah, no, he's definitely a future Socceroo in my opinion. Yeah, it was spewing when he left. I thought we'd give him a chance, so hopefully he'll stay loyal and commit another year or 2 to the Jets. But it didn't eventuate. But yeah, he started off slowly, and then towards the end of the season he was just bossing it in the midfield. Him, Stevie, Kanarowski. So yeah, he was good. He's a good pickup. I'm sure you know that already from the couple of games that you've seen. But yeah, we're going to miss him this year, I think.
Yeah, he's a good player. I think he can really fulfill any of those 6, 8 or 10 roles that you see across traditional midfield threes now. It looks likely from what I've seen so far that he'll probably play more as a number 10 this season for Melbourne City, and I thought he was phenomenal in that box-to-box role last year for Jets, and I think kind of that late season charge and the way that you pulled away from the teams in 3rd and 4th and made it through to the grand final was very much down to the work that he and Ugarkovic were doing in the engine room for Newcastle. It was a very impressive outfit once they got up and going. So the next ones I'll go through a little bit quicker. Mario Chabau has headed to Central Coast Mariners. I don't think he played a tremendous amount of football in his time at the Jets. He has bounced around now from Western Sydney and I believe another team prior to that. So obviously just a youngster trying to find a home to get an opportunity. Did you see much of him play before he left?
Yeah, I did. I was hoping he'd stay. But he's got his chance at Central Coast. I think he can sort of get that chance to become a starter, and I think he will grab it with both hands. He's a pretty good player. So I was spewing that he left, but yeah, with the depth we had, it's hard for him to get a run.
I think he has a great commentary name as well, Chabau. Like, you can just imagine people screaming it as he slams goals in from 35 yards. So it is interesting to see how fierce that rivalry with Central Coast got over, certain periods, particularly around that sort of 2008, 2009, 2010 period. And now, more frequently than ever, we see players relatively easily move between the two clubs, whether it's off contract or being released from contracts or whatever else. So I'm not sure if it's softened a little bit off the pitch, and I'm sure the influence of Laurie McKinnon has helped a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues, if Newcastle are going to continue up the right end of the table in future years. The next one is Wayne Brown, who's headed to Sutton United, which is a team currently playing in the National League, the 5th tier of English football. probably a step down, you would think, from the standard that he's been playing at with the Newcastle Jets. Obviously, it's a bit tough. There's extra pressure that comes when you are an international player taking up a visa position. But what did you make of Wayne Brown in his time at the club?
Yeah, well, his first game, he scored a screamer, and I thought, from what I'd seen, some of the highlights and that goal, I thought he was going to boss the A-League. And then from there, he started to go downhill. But last year, towards the end, he started to come into his own again. So I thought maybe they might sign him again. But yeah, as you said, it's a visa spot. You need to be a special player these days to get that visa spot. So we replaced him with, I think it's Jair. I think that's how you say it, or Jair. So hopefully he's got a bit of a record. So hopefully he can score some goals. But yeah, Wayne was good, but hopefully the future's brighter with some of the players we're bringing in.
Yeah, and I think it's never a bad problem to have. You always want to see good young Australian talent emerge, but I think the emergence of Steven Ugarkovic as being that kind of critical linchpin number 6 limited some of Wayne Brown's chances in the team. So not ideal. There's always a loser and a winner when it comes to football in terms of positional play and that sort of stuff, and it is a shame to see him go. But I think Ugarkovic, you'll likely get him at the club now for the next 4, 5, 6 years, and if you can continue to build around him, then the future's bright for that midfield if he's going to be involved in it. The next one is Jack Duncan, who's headed to, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Al Qudsaya in Saudi Arabia for $450,000, which is a decent return for a player that you picked up on a free from Randers, I believe it was, over in Denmark.
Yeah, Jack. He was a bit hot and cold last year as well, and a lot of the supporters voiced that. I think they like Glenn Moss, so he gets his chance again this year. But yeah, Jack was young, and he's gone now. So what can you do? We got the money, so yeah, I don't really know much more to say about him. So
yeah, if you're going to focus on the positive, it's not that he turned around and demanded a mutual termination of his contract to try and move to Saudi Arabia. You at least got revenue for that particular sale. That does move us into the contracts that have been extended over this year, and you just mentioned him. Glenn Moss has signed a 1-year contract extension. He is now 38 years old, and it does look like he'll enter the season as your first choice goalkeeper. What are your thoughts on Glenn Moss, and are you a part of that fan club that you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, I was. I try not, even if someone is having a bit of a rough couple of games, I try not to get on their back, because I know that they can. Sometimes they read what the crowd's saying, and it can affect the performance even more. But yeah, I was happy when Glenn Moss came in. I didn't see much errors from him. He saved some screamers. So yeah, I'm hoping he can carry on that way this year.
He does have a good track record with Ernie Merrick as well. They played together. He played under Ernie Merrick at Melbourne Victory, then again at Wellington, and now again at Newcastle Jets. So it's obviously a goalkeeper that the coach has faith in and the management team believes in. So I think that does go a long way in helping. I'll be completely honest, from an impartial person, and not at all impartial because I'm totally biased with City. I really thought the club would aggressively pursue Mark Birighitti once he was available on the market. Obviously, he was phenomenal for Newcastle the few seasons that he played in the red and blue of the club, and once he became available, I really thought that was someone they'd pursue a bit more aggressively. Would you have liked to see Mark Birighitti make a return to the club, and do you think that the goalkeeper stocks are going to be okay with Glenn Moss in that number 1 position?
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about with Glenn Moss, when they get a bit older, they tend to get a few injuries, so that's the only thing I'm worried about. But we've got Luis Italiano in. I'm sitting on the fence with that one, with that signing so far. I'll judge him once he gets on the field. But yeah, Birighitti, as soon as I seen he was free, I was like, oh, please. But yeah, it didn't eventuate. So good luck to him at City. But yeah, he's a special player. I don't know why he didn't get his chance overseas. I don't know what the go was at that club. It was politics or just injuries or whatever. But yeah, spewing to miss out on Mark.
Yeah, it's always tough when you're a goalkeeper because you think your peak period is sort of 27 through to 35 almost, and he's still young. He's only 25, so time will tell what happens there. I think the tricky part with Glenn Moss and Luis Italiano is that you'd say both of them over the last 2 or 3 seasons have been the backup goalkeeper for the squads they've been in. So it'll be interesting to see how they compete against each other this year and really go after that goalkeeping position. But it's a good problem to have, I guess. Equal partnership between your goalkeepers and decent enough depth there. The other one is local boy Ben Kantarovski signed a 2-year contract extension. Played in a little bit more limited a role, I believe, last year with the emergence of Ugarkovic and the likes of Wayne Brown and Riley McGree. Do you see Kantarovski as ever getting back into that preferred Jets 11, or do you see him being like a good 13th, 14th player for that particular squad?
Yeah, I think he can get back into that form that he was in, well, was it 4 or 5 years ago? He started to show it last year. I know the year before that, a lot of supporters were starting to get on his back. But then last year, he started off the season fairly well with that initial win against Central Coast in the derby. And yeah, he just went from strength to strength from there. So I'm hoping he can carry on that form this year, because he's an important player if he is fit and staying on the field. He can be like that sort of like Hoffman player where they thought like his career was starting to dwindle out, but yeah, he's flipped it around. So hopefully Kantarovski can carry on that way too.
Where do you see his best position being? Because obviously making your debut at 16, it makes it feel like you've been around forever. He's still only 23 or 24 years old, I believe. Where do you see him slotting in? Is it going to be in central midfield as more of an anchor, or will he drop further back and continue to play as a central defender?
I think he's going to be like the holding midfielder. Yeah, I think Bugard and Topper Stanley are. I know when Bugard broke his leg last season, Kantarovski was trialled back there, and yeah, it just didn't seem to work. That's when we went on a bit of that run where we lost a bit of form and lost a few games. So yeah, I think from the midfielder, he's from the base of the midfield, that's where he's more suited. He's not the quickest guy, but he can pick a pass, and he loves to get dirty and get in and make those tackles. So I think that's where his spot is for this year.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think that Bugard Topor Stanley combination is pretty fantastic. I've always been a big Topor Stanley fan since his time initially at Sydney FC and then Perth and then Western Sydney. He seems to incrementally improve any team that he's involved with. So yeah, it's a good combo, and hopefully one that you'll get another 2 or 3 years out of as well. Speaking of, Nigel Bugard has signed another 1-year contract extension, as has Nick Cowburn. I think Bugard you'd expect as captain of the club to continue on in a similar fashion this year, but good to have him locked in for another season before he likely is either poached by one of the bigger teams around the A-League, or really, if we're being completely honest, as one of the competition's premier defenders, heads over to an Asian league to try and get that big final payday.
Yeah, I was thinking that when he re-signed as well. I was like, if he has another good season, that'll probably be the outcome going overseas. So, and the club said that they won't stop players from trying to look at those sort of opportunities. So, yeah, but if he's playing good football, he deserves that, I guess. And if he is playing good football, it's only good for the Jets. So, yeah, what can you do about it? These things happen.
Yep, and the other big contract extended is Ronnie Vargas signing on for another year. For those of you that aren't familiar, he had a pretty horrendous injury early on in last season after showing some pretty great performances in the first few rounds of the season. Are you glad to see them keep faith with Vargas, have him stay on for another year? And do you believe with a full season under his, with a full preseason under his belt, that he'll be able to kind of take the team to another level?
Yeah, I was ecstatic when they signed him. As I said before, it was between Pato or Ronnie. So it was good to see they signed him. Yeah, when last season when he broke his leg against Brisbane Roar, we were on a bit of a run. I think we were second at the time, and we were winning games left, right, and centre. When that happened, I was like, oh, there goes our season, because everything was just, all the plays were just coming off him. He was setting up goals. It was just amazing. So, and then he came back towards the end of the season. When I seen the way that he broke his leg, I thought he was gone for the season. So he came back in and got his fitness and got into the starting position, and you can just see he's a different type of player. So, yeah, I can't wait to see him this season. Him and Dimmy up top, so creating things, pulling the strings. So, yeah, I can't wait to see him.
Yeah, definitely. I think in an off-season where we have lost a couple of the key international imports that have set the league on fire, the likes of Adrian and Leroy George and even Bobo for Sydney, to keep Vargas for another season, and hopefully can light up the league a little bit with a full season under his belt. Not too well. I hope he struggles against City, but other than that, he's a human highlight reel, so hopefully that continues. Right, so the exciting ones. Let's head to the players that have come in. Matt Riddington has signed from Wellington. Have you caught much of his play when he was playing for the Knicks?
No, I haven't at all, actually. I was just thinking that when you said Matt Riddington, I was like, I've heard good things so far during the pre-season, but yeah, I don't really watch Wellington games, so yeah, I haven't seen too much about him.
Yeah, he's tidy. I don't mind him, actually. I think he thrives when he has a superior player next to him and he's more of the shuttle runner. I thought that really good midfield three that Wellington had a couple of years ago with Albert Riera as the anchor and God, what's his name? He's playing with Rolly Bonavacia as sort of, the chief playmaker. He really thrived in that role. So he's still young, obviously a Kiwi international already, but he could be a solid addition to that midfield alongside Ugarkovic and likely Vargas playing as a 10. So be interesting to see how Andy Merrick intends to use him. They obviously did work together previously at Wellington, and he is pretty highly rated across footballing circles in New Zealand. So I think he's a decent signing. I'm not 100% sure if he is a signing to challenge for a starting berth or if he's just a high quality 13th, 14th, 15th type player. But yeah, fingers crossed he can kick on and go to another level. The interesting one is it Yeah? Is that how you pronounced it earlier?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I'm totally on board. Who signed from Chinese outfit Yambi and Funde FC. He has a pretty good goal and assist record playing in the Chinese division. It's tough because China, the good teams are very, very good and the poor teams are incredibly poor. So it'll be interesting to see how he makes the jump across to A-League football, which traditionally is a little bit more physical and fitness based. But have you managed to catch any of him in the preseason run-up so far?
No, I haven't seen it. He's played minimally anyway because Ernie said his fitness hasn't been up to scratch. I think he played 20 minutes last weekend when we versed Wanderers and won 4-0, but he didn't get on the score sheet. But yeah, can't wait to see how he goes. Actually, linking up with Vargas and Petrados. As you said, he's got that good record with the goals, and hopefully, if we make the Asian Champions League, he'll be able to help us get through the group stages if we do get that far. But and he is a bit of a, I don't know if he's the plan B. I guess with Roy out, Roy might be the plan B now. So or they might, I don't know if they'll play two up top or when they're both fit and not suspended. So it'd be good to see how they go.
Yeah, I think he can play in wide positions as well, but I guess that depends entirely on his fitness and how that comes back. So also brought in Mitch Austin across from Melbourne Victory. I'll kind of jump in a little bit here. I don't think he is an A-League quality player, but he's obviously physically incredibly tall, very quick across a 5-yard period. If you're going to have someone that you're going to bring on the bench for 10 minutes and hopefully make something happen against a tired defence, he's not a bad player to pick up.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right there. I'll leave my judgment for the season to see if he's an A-League quality player. But yeah, if he's when he was at Central Coast, he was on fire, and Melbourne Victory don't seem to buy players that aren't A-League quality. So there was a reason why they signed him. So and then he was injured, unfortunately. But yeah, hopefully can prove the doubters wrong.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I'm not going to lie, more often than not, I am proven to be incorrect than actually correct. So when we do the season review at the end of the year, man, you can throw that one back in my face because Mitch Austin's gotten 10 goals and 10 assists for the year or something to that effect.
He scored the winner in the final against City. Perfect.
Yeah, he probably bloody will, knowing me. So the other one as well is Kane Shepherd's been picked up from Avondale, which is a National Premier League side down here. He's got a really good goal-scoring pedigree. I'm not sure if you keep up with any of the NPL competitions down here, but for the last few years, Heidelberg's been the team to beat. He is an English international. I'm not sure if he has dual citizenship, and that's how Newcastle have brought him in. But a really, really good sort of, it can play as a 10, can play as a striker as well. A key ingredient behind Heidelberg's success, and then actually got a decent money move to Avondale, who've been recruiting pretty aggressively and pretty heavily with ex-A-League players in Jonathan Germano, who played at Melbourne City, and also Joey Katabian, who was a junior at Melbourne Victory and played a fair bit for Brisbane Roar as well. So he's coming out of a very good team and he was a star in that team. So it'll be interesting to see how he makes the jump up to A-League football this year.
Yeah, it would be good. Add a bit of depth. As you said, he can play out wide or play as a striker. So depending on what Ernie's plans are, he looks like a good pickup.
And the other one we've already kind of spoken out about a little bit. Luis Italiano has joined from Wellington on a free transfer. It'll be interesting to see how he goes. I do think he's brought in with the intention of being a backup to Glenn Moss. It remains to be seen whether the club was actually looking for a number one to keep Glenn Moss as the second. But I do think he's got decent depth. He's only 24 years old. He does have experience in the league if you need it out of a backup goalkeeper. So it's not a horrible combo. So it depends entirely what opportunities he gets throughout the course of this season, but they really are his to make the most of when they present themselves.
Well, yeah, I'm sitting on the fence as I said before. I've watched a few games of these, so but generally with goalkeepers, when they're younger, you see they start to make a lot of mistakes, but when they get better, once they get older, they start to get a bit better. So I'm hoping that'll be the case with him, and with Glenn Moss, they're helping him out. He's only going to get better.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got to be optimistic, mate. We're before round one. You haven't had a chance to go out there and lose yet, so anything could happen. This is when it's written down in an Excel spreadsheet, such as the one that we're looking at right now. Anybody can win the league. So fingers crossed, it all works out and that they carry on their good form from last year. Right, so the marquee player, we have spoken about him a little bit, Ronald Vargas. Where do you see him slotting into the team this year? And do you think him being fit and available changes any of the way that you played last season with the likes of Petratos playing probably a little bit more as an advanced 10 and the likes of Nabu obviously involved in that team, no longer there, but how do you think the structure changes this year with Vargas as the primary playmaker?
Yeah, I'm not too sure how he's going to control that with Dimmy and Ronnie, what they're going to do there. So he could play a deeper role, I guess, or Dimmy could do that as well. So I don't know how he's going to put them on the field both at the same time. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. With relation to the way we play, it was more attacking last year, more of a counter sort of gameplay. So I'm hoping it continues the way it was because last year was good. With Nabu on one wing and we had Hoffy on the other wing, it was really good to watch. So hopefully they can do that again. If it's Year on the wing or Austin, I don't know who, but we have a lot of versatile players, so it's a strength of ours, so it should help.
So some of the feedback that I'd been getting was that in pre-season they'd been trying a variation of like a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2 with both Petratos and Vargas kind of playing in the half spaces, not as like out-and-out wingers and not really as out-and-out 10s. And I'm not sure how that's working or if it's just them trying to test a couple of things out in pre-season, but it will be interesting to see how they integrate the both of them in there. Obviously, I think Petratos has a long history of playing in wide positions, like either wing. I don't think it's his preferred role. I think he'd prefer to play as a number 10. And obviously he did fantastically well as the club continued their great run last season. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting one, but I guess it's a problem you'd rather have two fantastic playmakers at your disposal and trying to wedge them in than looking around the squad, seeing who's going to be the chief creator for the side. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. The captain, again, of course, following on from the last few seasons, is local-born Nigel Bugard. What is your rate? What do they call him? What's his nickname around there?
Boogs.
Yeah, I guess that's the one that makes sense. There's so many different variations that you could apply to that particular name. It's 90% O's and A's. But yeah, how do you think Boogs will go this season? And do you think he, as a leader in that group, was responsible for much of the uptick in form last year?
Yeah, no, he was definitely part of that uptake in form, as you said, solely down to, as you say, everyone knows a good team starts at the back, defensively strong. Him and Topper Stanley were good, and you had Georgeski on one side and Hoffman on the other side. Vujitsa got a chance early on, but then he drifted off. But yeah, he's a good leader. The club, the town loves him, so hopefully he goes from strength to strength this year.
And hopefully if he does, he signs more than a 1-year contract extension so that you can get some money out of him if he does end up going overseas. But time will tell with that one. So the current manager, Ernie Merrick, obviously very experienced within the A-League itself, won titles with Melbourne Victory, was their coach from their inception all the way through to I think their 6th or 7th year almost, and has obviously had another ill-fated stint with Wellington wedged in between of his time at Newcastle. What do you make of Ernie Merrick and his assistant manager team of Clayton Zane and Kean Lee?
I don't know much about Kean Lee, but yeah, Ernie's been good from day one. As soon as he came in, he didn't make no excuses like some of the coaches we've had. We've had some coaches come in and look at, we're looking at a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan. Ernie just came in straight away and was just told the truth from the start. He said, "We just got to be successful. We're going to try and make the semis and go from there." And he did that. So hopefully this year, if things do change, teams sort of do a bit more study on us because we're a bit more successful now. They're going to try and know more about the way we play, but hopefully he's got a few tricks up his sleeve. As I said, we've got a versatile squad, so that can help with formations and tactics and those sort of things. So hopefully he's got a plan B and C up his sleeve. But yeah, we love Ernie, so he's a good pickup.
He's definitely an entertaining manager, but he's always we're going to win a game 4-3 rather than win a game 1-0. And I don't know, time will tell if teams figure out a way to stop Newcastle and still get their own opportunities. But I think a big part of their success last year is that as soon as you're in possession, it was gung-ho and everyone was getting forward. And some of the football was fantastic to watch, and some of the games were incredibly entertaining. But for a fan sitting there in the stands, I don't know how you can sit through some of those games where you're scoring 3 but conceding another 4 or 5 chances of your own. So very Cavalier style, but definitely a super entertaining one, and definitely one that I think will bring a lot of people back around Newcastle as well. So long may it continue. All right, so a couple of questions for you. One that I kind of highlighted before, and then another one that I'll spring as a bit of a surprise. Who is your one to watch for the 2018 season? So we have, the 2018-2019 season. We have spoken about the captain, obviously, and the marquee and Ronnie Vargas. Who do you think will be the player to watch that might have a bit of a breakout year for the club?
I don't know if it's a breakout year, but I'm going to. Last year was his breakout year, so hopefully he has another breakout year. But last year, I don't know where it came from. Like, I was one of those sort of guys that was looking at him negatively in the squad. But yeah, he started off at right back and he started playing at midfield. He was creating chances, scoring goals. I don't know where it came from, but he's exciting to watch, and he's a crowd favourite now. So I'm hoping that continues this year. So
I think it cut out there for a moment. Jason Hoffman is who you're referring to?
Yeah, Hoffy, yeah. Jason Hoffman, yeah.
Yeah, so he was part of Melbourne Heart and then Melbourne City when they were eventually purchased for a good few years. And I'm not going to lie, he was absolutely useless. And then I don't know what happened last year. He must just enjoy that sort of Hunter Valley environment where he started his career. And he was a completely different player. So his versatility and his ability to play a variety of different positions, particularly in a salary cap league where you are limited in the players you can sign, is invaluable. So it'll be interesting to see where he actually lines up this particular season. But definitely if he can carry on the run of form that he had last year, he'll be an entertaining player to watch and in and around the starting 11 for most of the season. So on a similar token, that's our one to watch. Who's the one to hate? Who do you think is the player that most opposition clubs will rock up at the at McDonald's Jones Stadium just to boo them? And who do you think will be the biggest frustration for other teams?
I'm going to say Dimi Petratos, mostly because he's our best player. So yeah, just some of the things he can do with the ball is he can control the game, he can change the game, he can hit shots from miles out, as we've seen in some of the highlights last year and the year before. So yeah, he's definitely the one that people hate.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and I'm going to suggest Roy O'Donovan. I think he's fantastic and a really great poacher, but he plays that game on that crazy knife edge that so many forwards within the A-League do, where he's just as likely to score a hat-trick as he is to headbutt a Lions person and get himself sent off. So I think he's definitely the one to hate for opposition sides, but I think Petratos is a fantastic shout as well, just for his quality and his ability to consistently deliver over 27 rounds of a season.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, with Roy, he's going to be out. I think it's the first 7 or 8 games, so it's going to be a big loss. But as I said, we've got that plan B with Yair or Austin or Shepherd, so we've got a bit of depth. Or Hoffy can play up top as well. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from as well. But he's got to stay on the field. Yeah,
it's actually a shame when you talk about O'Donovan that you didn't go further in the FFA Cup, because I believe those games count as part of his suspension. So if they had gone on like a semi-final run or a final run, he'd have served a good 3 or 4 of his suspension games before the actual season kicked off. But I think under current course, he's due to come back in round 6 or round 7 or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, 6 or 7, I think it is. Yeah.
Cool. So we have spoken about it previously. The big question I think Newcastle have to answer this season is that Ernie Merrick famously yo-yoed during his career, especially his time at Melbourne Victory. They'd have a fantastic season and they'd challenge for the title and be in the top one or two teams in the division. And then the year after, whether it's his playing style or needing to make adjustments or personnel that he gains or loses, they seem to struggle the year after. Do you think he's adopted a plan B, or are we due to see similar yo-yo form for Newcastle and they're looking for a struggling or mid-table year this season?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with a bit of a history where he's got that yo-yo effect, I guess. But I haven't looked too much into it, so I don't know what turnover there's been of staff and players, but in the past. But this year, I'm pretty sure we've retained most of the squad apart from McGree on the boot left halfway through the season, and we've added a few players that are, in my opinion, quality. So I think we should be all right. But as I said, we just got to hopefully have a plan B or C. If teams start to predict what we're going to do, hopefully we can change it around. But yeah, I'm fairly confident with the squad we got.
If you were going to adopt a plan B, what would you like to see the team go to, whether it's a different formation or a different style or something that you'd like to see change to kind of elevate you to the next level?
Well, depending on the form of and O'Donovan, even if we can look to have some sort of formation with two up top would be good. I don't know how you're going to afford to have two of them in the... Oh, I don't know how they play yet, but two up top would be the go that could hopefully take us to the next level. But yeah, time will tell.
Yeah, it's not unheard of. If you think back to the Leicester side that won the Premier League, they were very successful playing two up top. And I think there are definitely parallels to be drawn between their counter-attacking style and the way they set up their defensive blocks to the way that the Newcastle Jets did last season as well. So I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibility, but maybe you would like to see him favour a bit of defensive stability and then counter-attacking with two players breaking quickly and then obviously wingers trying to join them. The obvious areas that you don't have N'Golo Kante to do the running of 6 or 7 men in midfield. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what sort of tweaks they make this season to kind of go to that next level and hopefully have a backup option, particularly with the prospect of Champions League football, having to manage a relatively threadbare squad across a variety of different competitions and the long distances of travel. I think it will force them into coming up with something, but what it is remains to be seen. So it's a difficult one to answer, and I thought I kind of threw you under the bus there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I can understand the question, but yeah, hopefully, that if that does occur, hopefully it does work out. Just, the more goals, the better, and that'll just bring the crowd to Newcastle because that's what they want, entertainment.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the elephant in the room for Newcastle is last season obviously went on a phenomenal run, played some really great attacking football. Do you think they're ever going to get a better opportunity than the grand final last year against Melbourne Victory to add to their championship collection? And what I will say, and this is just me being the devil's advocate and not necessarily trying to antagonise you, is that even though Melbourne Victory's goal should have been ruled out by VAR, and it pains me more than anybody as a City fan to see them win their 4th championship, Newcastle didn't really have an answer to find a goal of their own in that match.
Yeah, well, because Superman was in goals. Did you see Lawrence Thomas? I was watching the other day at the gym. I hate watching replays of that game, but I'm like, I haven't watched like a replay for a while, so I didn't. I forgot how good he was in that game. Like, man, if it was like anyone else in goals, we could have won 2 or 3-1. So I was spewing about that. But
I think by the time we got to the end of the 90 minutes, he was more strapping tape than man. But yes, he had a phenomenal performance.
He wasn't. That kick to the head didn't hurt him because I seen him out on King Street at 3 o'clock in the morning at McDonald's, so he was all right.
Oh yeah, I think once you've got that tape around your head and that like kind of trickle of blood running down the front of your face, you're definitely overdue for a pint or 12, and I'm sure they made the most of it.
Yeah, they sure did.
So what I'll expand a little bit further, and we didn't talk about this one beforehand, but the big, I think, conversation taking place around the A-League at the moment is around expansion. What would you like to see added in terms of expansion? Obviously, New South Wales, and being a New South Wales fan, already has quite a few teams, and the early talk is that the FFA is favouring further teams in that region. Where would you like to see the expansion take place for the next teams entering the league? And what sort of reasoning do you give behind that as a Newcastle fan?
Look, I'm not an expert on the subject, but based on what I've seen, I think in the MLS, a more more teams in the central areas, so like Sydney, another team in Queen, like Brisbane area, another team. I don't know if in Melbourne because you got two now, but the more derbies the better because you see with the derbies it just brings the crowds and there's more interest. So if there's more derbies every week, it's just gonna be better for the crowds. So as I said, I'm not an expert on it, but I can see people wanting to take teams regionally as well and to places that there's no teams anywhere near. But yeah, I'd like to see a few more derbies in the league,
What's
especially
the
after the City
what's the
victory.
relationship between Newcastle and Wollongong for the Wollongong Wolves bid?
A relationship between us two, is there?
Yeah, is there much like competition between the two regions? Is there much of a rivalry being, kind of the second cities almost within New South Wales?
I guess yeah, you could say we're like this sort of like a steel city like us with the Illawarra Steelers down that way. So yeah, I guess there could be some sort of rivalry as well. Yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing them because they got a not a bad stadium, not a bad setup, and I think Sydney played a few games down there last year, and they had a decent turnout. So yeah, I haven't looked into each bid and ranked them as regards to who I'd like in the to win the expansion bids, but yeah, they'd be one I'd like to see.
Look,
Now,
regardless of I think who comes through, it's an exciting time. I
yeah,
think the league's been overdue for a long time to be adding more teams, and it's just due to either the ineptitude or unwillingness, or perhaps a bit hesitant given the fates that North Queensland Fury and Gold Coast United suffered during their expansion and short tenures in the league. But it is exciting to see not just that there are there is the possibility of seeing the league add more teams, but that there's so much interest from so many different interested parties around the country. I think that was the really exciting portion, that there were a good 16, 17, 18 applications that had real weight behind them and people willing to invest money in the game, invest their time and try and get that up and running. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be interesting to see how it affects Newcastle and if there are any further derbies in that New South Wales region, or if they'll be travelling interstate to try and beat the living shit out of new boys within the league.
mm, yeah, it would be good to see, won't it? I just can't wait to see some new teams freshen it up a bit, and hopefully it's not a one-off thing. We have to wait another 5 or 6 years. Hopefully, yeah, if the clubs are financially viable and they got backers and they got their own sort of stadiums and things like that. Hopefully, yeah, it's not a one-off thing that happens every 5 years. Hopefully, it can happen more regular.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen them announce it in two tiers almost. Like everybody puts their applications forward, and then the two best applications they announce for entry into the competition in the 1920 season, and then the two that perhaps are a little bit further down the line and need to secure either a stadium or sponsors or whatever else are announced for like the 2022, 23 season or something like that. So we at least have something to look forward to,
Yeah.
and we obviously have a clear progression. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the next month or so as they're announced. All right, so the next one I want you to put forward, it may be to new people living in Newcastle that haven't really gotten around the Jets and have been long-time Knights supporters in the NRL, or it might be people that haven't quite yet renewed their membership. What would your pitch be to fans that are currently sitting on the fence and why they should get around the Jets this season?
I just send them a video of some Jimmy Petratos' highlights. Like that would just every time I see him, I get goosebumps. He's just a freak. Like you see that kind of stuff on the TV ads which they're promoting now. I've seen a few more come out today, and he's all over them. So I'd just show them and just get to a game, and if the rest of the crowd is there like they were last year, and you're seen in the grand final, the semis, we don't need to ask you to come back next week because you'll be banging the door down to come watch them.
Yeah, I think if they start the season well and there's 10,000 members rocking up to the first few home games of the season, anybody that walks into that environment is going to want to be a part of it moving forward. So, yeah, definitely a decent shout. And I don't know what it is about A-League YouTube highlights packages, but they always seem to have a Linkin Park song playing in the background, and you can just imagine Dimi Petratos running around to some early 2002 rap metal or whatever we're supposed to call it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see him banging a few more this year. It's going to be good.
So the next one I think is season expectations. What do you expect to see from the Jets this season? Is it just a continuation of how they performed last year, or would you like to see them make any relevant changes to move to that next level and actually be the ones leading the pack rather than chasing?
I'd like to see us continue from where we were last year, but it was like in some sort of games. I'm not a coach, but from what I'm analysing, we started to drift in and out of games where as you said before, we were more of a counter-attacking team. Where I'd like to see we'd still have that aspect to our game, but I'd like to see our midfielders, and we've Ronnie coming back in fitness. Hopefully, he can help us control the ball a bit longer and hold on to the ball a bit more, and hopefully we can control sort of games instead of just going after them on the counter attack. Hopefully we can build up from the back and play forward from there.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is when you set your team up to be counter-attacking in the style that Newcastle is, by the time you get to the halfway point and, rounds 20 through 27, teams have figured out that that's what you're trying to do and just are happy to let you have the ball and drop off and sit deep and try and be broken down. So it's always a tough element for teams that set up with that counter-attacking style, but it'd be interesting to see how they solve that particular problem this year, particularly for sides that are travelling to the McDonald Jones Stadium.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. I can't wait.
All right, so what's your prediction for the league itself? Who do you think is going to be the team to beat? Who do you think will finish on top? And also, who do you think will finish as the wooden spoon team this particular season?
So Melbourne Victory, I think, just based on the players they brought in, like they got Keisuke Honda. I can't remember the striker they brought in, but that Swedish guy, he's
Ola Toivonen.
Yeah, is that his name? Yeah. I couldn't remember it, but yeah, they've brought some good players in, but they've lost some players as well, like Berisha, as you said before, Leroy George, but they've still got a lot of quality players. I think they brought a Spanish guy in as well from the La Liga, so they're probably be my tip to win it. But they were my tip to win the FFA Cup, and they lost to Apia. So yeah, I'm not too good at tipping, but yeah, they're my tip to win it.
Who is your pick for the wooden spoon for this season?
Mariners, definitely. If they're chasing after a player like Usain Bolt, I think they deserve the spoon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that experiment plays out, to be honest with you. I think they've got a friendly the weekend now in which we're recording, and if he doesn't really set the world on fire in that one, it may be interesting to see if the Usain Bolt experiment continues any further. But you'll have to listen into the season preview with Central Coast Mariners that has also already come out to see our thoughts and feelings on that one. So, prediction, where do you think Newcastle Jets are going to finish, and how do you think they're going to go this weekend in their round 1 fixture against Wellington?
I'm confident of top 4 finish, and if you do finish in the top 4, it's a lot easier to go forward because you get the home final. I think it is if you're 3rd or 4th or 1st or 2nd. So yeah, I'm hoping for the top 4. And then against Wellington, yeah, we should go all right. Got everyone on board apart from Roy, and hopefully no injuries in training throughout the week. But yeah, I'm confident of victory. Start of the season.
Perfect, man. I think Newcastle will have a really exciting year ahead. It's either going to go fantastically well and they're going to really start building a footballing dynasty around some of the players that we've spoken about, and Ernie Merrick's finally going to get his second attempt at a footballing dynasty at a particular club with back-to-back successful years, or alternatively they're going to struggle and they're going to need to kind of develop their football program further by adding those extra layers, those plans B's and C's that we've spoken about. But either way, it's going to be fantastic to watch, and I do think when they're playing at home and trying their hardest to entertain the crowd, they're going to be brilliant to watch. So fingers crossed it is a fantastic season for them. Ricky, did you want to do a couple of plugs if you've got your Twitter, your Instagram, and any other pages that you want to share as well?
I've got a Facebook page called Newcastle Jets Supporters, and that's on Facebook. And on Instagram, we also have it's called Newcastle Jets Supporters as well. So they mirror each other. So whatever's on the Facebook page reflects on the Instagram page.
Yeah, perfect. And for anyone who's struggling to find that particular link or that group on Facebook, there will be a link on the @InTheMixer_pod Twitter account that is available from the upload of this video. So feel free to go along, give that page a like, support Ricky, and support the Jets throughout the course of this season as well. Ricky, thank you so much for joining me, man. I do really appreciate it. I've thoroughly enjoyed the chat and getting to know Newcastle's squad, their fans, and their expectations for the season ahead. And even though I hope you don't do that well against City, I do wish you all the best for the season.
Cheers, thanks. Same for you, mate.
All right, thanks again, everybody, for watching or listening, depending if you're consuming this one on YouTube at @InTheMixer_podcast, or on SoundCloud at @InTheMixer_podcast, or on Twitter at @InTheMixer_pod. I've been Sean, as always, and I look forward to seeing you guys again in the Mixer.